On this channel, I'm extremely interested in showing you tiny changes that you can easily make that deliver massively outsized returns for your health. And when it comes to sleep, exposure to light has a huge impact, and I want to show you some small changes that you can implement. And I'm not just talking about blue light from your phone. Instead, I want to show you a certain kind of light that at a precise time in the day can have an outsized impact in improving your sleep. Scientists first became aware of how light connects to sleep about 100 years ago. The first researcher to concentrate on sleep, Nathaniel Kleitman, even spent a month deep within a cave to see how the absence of light affected sleep cycles. And one of the things that we've discovered is the significance of outdoor light. So a European study from 2003 looked at when people go to sleep and the amount of time that they spend outside. They discovered a strong relationship. The more time spent outside correlates with an earlier bedtime, but this isn't the only effect of outdoor light. Exposure also increases sleep duration and boosts sleep quality. To take this further, researchers compared two groups of office workers. So one group worked in a space without windows, while the other group had windows in them. The group without the windows had poorer sleep quality with more sleep disturbances. They also slept for a shorter time on average. But those office workers without windows, they weren't working in the dark. So why is daylight as opposed to artificial light so significant? Well, one of the key factors is brightness. Outside, light intensity can range from about 10,000 lux to several times that, but indoor light, it only gets to about 400 lux, and we'll come back to why that matters in a moment. But first, it's also important to understand that the timing of light matters when it comes to sleep. So a study of college students measured the impact of bright light in the morning, and the researchers found that it improved a variety of measures of sleep quality. So this study shows us that morning light is effective, but it didn't compare the impact of light exposure at different times of the day. So another study that focused on office workers took timing into account. Scientists had participants wear a monitor that would measure the light exposure throughout the day, and consistent with other studies, high levels of the right kind of light during the whole day were associated with better sleep. But they also discovered that those getting high amounts of light exposure, specifically in the morning, had better sleep compared to those who didn't. And a new study from last year adds one more piece of evidence. Researchers took a look at how the timing of sunlight exposure relates to sleep quality. They found again that sunlight exposure in the morning seemed to be decisive for sleep quality that night. So the evidence shows that getting bright light like that found outside, specifically in the morning, can significantly boost markers of sleep quality. But how big of a deal is this? What does better sleep end up meaning for our health? Well, research has connected getting adequate sleep to a surprising number of health outcomes. So for example, a study investigated sleep in relation to the development of metabolic syndrome. This is a cluster of conditions that raises our risks of heart disease, strokes, and type 2 diabetes. They tracked 3,000 people for 5 years, and individuals who slept 6 hours or less a night were most likely to develop metabolic syndrome. Sleep also seemed to impact the immune system. So in one study, participants tracked their sleep and then they were exposed to the cold virus. Those who got less than 7 hours on average were nearly 3 times more likely to catch the cold rather than those who got more than 8 hours. All this means is that we should be doing everything that we can to improve our sleep. So we're going to have a look at exactly how to get that morning sunlight that the research highlights is so critical. But first, let's take a closer look at the mechanism involved. So why is sunlight, specifically in the morning, linked to our sleep quality? Understanding this will help us take the most strategic approach. So humans, just like other animals, follow a cycle over the course of a 24-hour day. It's called the circadian rhythm, and it consists of a daytime, so a wake period, and then a nighttime, which is our sleep period. The cycle affects a ton of important processes like digestion, hormone production, and cellular repair. It's controlled by a master clock in our brains, and this clock gets set by light through special receptors in our eyes. This master clock, for example, regulates melatonin production, and melatonin is a hormone that promotes sleep. So when the receptors in our eyes detect the right kind of light, it sends a signal to our clock to shut off melatonin production, and at the same time, light triggers the release of cortisol and other hormones that increase alertness. With growing darkness, the process reverses. But what makes morning light so special? Well, the light receptors in our eyes, responsible for signaling to the master clock that control our circadian rhythm, are turned on with short wavelengths of light. In other words, they're more sensitive to bluish light. While natural light has a broad spectrum of wavelengths, the relative amounts shift through the day. So for example, in the morning, there's more short wavelength blue light, and in the afternoon, the spectrum shifts to more red light. So this means that the right kind of light that tells our brains that it's time to be awake is strongest in the morning. And sunlight also gives a much brighter light source than indoor lighting. A recent study brought these dynamics of light color and light intensity together and demonstrated their impact. Researchers tested the effects of bright white light, very dim white light, red light, and blue light on cortisol levels, the key hormone that rises in the morning to move us into daytime mode. They found that bright white light and blue light boosted cortisol levels, but the other lights did not. So now it's time to get practical. What strategies can we use to get morning sunlight that has the ideal wavelength and intensity to improve our sleep? How much do we need, and what about safety? And it might sound strange to talk about strategies here. Can't we just go outside and stand in the sun? Well, personally, I have more like starting a new habit if I've got some specific ways to go about it. And if that's you too, here are 6 things that you can try. First, open your curtains as soon as you wake up. You don't have to be outside to get morning sunlight. Get as much light through your windows as possible. And I want to pause here and say something about curtains. There's a good reason to consider blackout curtains. So we've been talking about the impact of morning sunlight and how it helps us wake up. But the flip side of this is that we want to avoid light at night. And researchers found that light exposure in the hours of sleep is correlated to a whole host of negative health impacts. These numbers, for instance, come from a study on older adults. So at night, we want to keep light in the bedroom to a minimum, and blackout curtains are a wonderful tool to do this. Second, combine sunlight exposure with another task. So when we want to make something a habit, it's a smart strategy to link it to something that we're already doing. Plus, it often allows us to take on a new habit without actually adding any extra time to our already busy schedules. So what's an example? Well, consider eating your breakfast by the window, or if the weather is suitable, consider eating your breakfast outside. As I've already explained in multiple videos, breakfast really is the most important meal of the day, and combining breakfast with morning sunlight exposure kills 2 birds with 1 stone. The third idea is to park further away from your place of work. So this forces you to walk a little bit and spend that time outside in the morning sun. Fourth, avoid wearing sunglasses for the first hour that you're outside the house. Let that wonderful morning sunlight reach your eyes. Now, I am going to talk about safety shortly, but overall this concept is a great option. Fifth, consider a light therapy device. So natural morning sunlight is ideal, but depending on your living situation or if you're a shift worker, it can be difficult to expose yourself to that morning sunlight. But here we can reap similar benefits by using a light therapy device. One of the studies that we looked at earlier, showing the benefits of morning sunlight with college students, used a device like this. The devices are specifically designed to have the right intensity of light to trigger a response, so look for a product with at least 10,000 lux. Now, a natural question here is how much light do we actually need to see an effect? And here is where we lack strong consensus. We don't have the research yet, but a typical recommendation is at least 30 minutes with a 10,000 lux lamp to get the best results. But talking about getting sunlight exposure in the morning is probably setting off alarm bells for some of us when thinking about UV radiation. So let's consider safety. First of all, this shouldn't be an issue with light therapy devices. Most commercially available options are generally designed to eliminate UV light, which is the wavelength that we need to avoid. But what about natural sunlight? Well, keep in mind that the impact on our sleep, it works through light receptors in our eyes, so we should cover up and wear sunblock to protect our skin. That's not going to interfere with the benefits. Plus, morning sunlight has less intense UV rays, so it's not nearly as dangerous as midday sun, for example. So an extra measure of caution can be clear UV blocking lenses that are available and won't dim the sunlight reaching our eyes. But as important as light is, it's only one consideration when it comes to sleep. Certain nutrients like magnesium and potassium, which are included in microvitamin, have been shown to be helpful, but if you want to maximize your chances of the best sleep ever, make sure to check out this next video here, where I reveal my entire evidence-based sleep protocol.